David. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much.
Good.
I'm really excited to be talking to you again about aging in place and design when you're talking about building an ADU or ordering one or getting one built, because there's a lot of things that in my process of building our ADU in our backyard for my 87-year-old father-in-law that, before I started that, I had no idea. But I know that these are things that you've been working on for years.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics, and it's tricky because if people aren't open and receptive to it, they just hear the phrase "aged in place" and sometimes can just shut down and kind of you know you know not want to talk about it. But the truth is, if you're not aging, you're not living. So it's much better to be proactive and age in place. So I'm so happy you're having the conversation because it's super important, and it can be really fun and beautiful. And that's why we call our company Inspired ADUs, because we believe it can be inspired, but also help stay as independent as possible. So it's one of my favorite topics.
No, I'm really excited about this webinar that we're doing. So welcome. If people are joining us as they join us, or if you're watching this as a recording, this is going to be just an interaction between Carrie and I as we kind of go over some things that are mentioned with AARP. And they have a great book, PDF download that I'll be sharing a link for. I know also that Carrie, you're going to be providing a link to a newsletter, Aging in Place. So that's going to be great. So if you're not joining us live today, we will be able to put those in the links where this is going to be posted on our social media platforms. Also, too, if you are with us, feel free to put any kind of questions into the chat or to the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. So with that, aging in place and what the heck? I know that you have a couple, I think, pictures or images or projects you've worked on, and I would love to see those. And if you could share that with people, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. It's funny because I think you and I are both in an interesting place where you and I have both just done an ADU for our aging parents. So I just finished my mom's. Well, not just, she's been in for since July.
So
And
July
you're doing one for July this year. So
Okay.
I figured it's about time to put my money where my mouth was. We've been designing ADUs since I think 2007 and 8. So about time to build one for my own parent and get them aging in place. But the decision is really, just fundamentally, ADUs are a great opportunity because they're often new construction. So when we're thinking about being able to build from scratch, we have a lot of opportunities to build in aging in place elements in a really mindful, thoughtful way that help people stay independent and honestly just make the ADUs more usable. So this is a cottage we did in Berkeley, a really fun site, one we've been really, really proud of and happy to look at. But I just wanted to look at how you think about access for the ADU, because that path is really important. This cottage actually the site actually sloped quite a bit in the back, and we built it up so that we could maintain a more level indoor outdoor everywhere. And, with aging in place designs, some of these things can be costly, but a lot of them don't have to be. So I will talk about one that can add some more cost. And this is one that we are often kind of arguing with or arm wrestling with contractors about, which is keeping that indoor outdoor level. So this requires some really smart planning in terms of the floor level of the cottage, what our foundation looks like. The easiest thing to do when building is just to build a new slab that sits up 8 inches. It's the most cost-effective way. You pour the slab in one piece usually. And so that when we're doing a lot of our inspired ADU cottages, we actually put the slab just a little bit above grade, like a half an inch to an inch. And then we put a concrete curb around the rest of the foundation. And that helps keep water out and make sure everything's sound and solid. But this is one piece where we do kind of add a little bit more cost to the projects. One of the big values, I think, of this indoor-outdoor is that you begin to borrow the landscape outside. And when we're thinking about, downsizing or living in a smaller space, if we can borrow some of that exterior yard space, it makes the cottage feel bigger. But there's also alternative ways if you really want to think about foundation, keeping it up higher, then you just really have to think about the approach from, the street or the side access so that you can get a little bit of a slope up for a path so that you cannot have any steps. But this is the big thing, is making sure we don't have a bunch of steps. That way, if you need it for a wheelchair, or if there's just, it works great. A lot of aging in place is also universal design, which is a really great concept, but it's always kind of seems silly to explain. It's like making things the most usable for the most number of people. And, like this entry is great. If you're coming in with a stroller and a dog on a leash and a bunch of groceries, like there's no lugging everything up. So entry is super, super important.
You were touching on something, and I thought was really great, because when we did our ADU and we had our stucco exterior put on, there was kind of like a little bit of I should know the phrase, but it's a little bit of a drip edge or something that the stucco kind of comes down to. And I think that the contractor was saying we had to have so many inches above grade. So I think that your idea of being able to have something it looks like there's no step, so like a very smooth transition from inside outside, is really a great idea. But you mentioned that it does take additional work and planning.
Right. Yeah. So what you're referencing is from a building code perspective, any building material like your wall framing has to be separated by 8 inches from soil on the outside. So that you can either do that with your elevated concrete slab or with the little stem concrete wall that comes up. But basically they want to prevent dry rot. They want to keep building materials away from moisture in the ground. So that's the intent of the building code. And so you have to solve that one way or the other. So this, putting this curb around the perimeter is really not that much harder to do. It's just you have to plan ahead, and you want your concrete subs to price it out that way, so you don't get any unexpected add-ons for your crazy architect's ideas.
Yes. And that's just the people that are going to be working on the slab. It's a curb.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's wonderful. I've learned something.
And the other thing we do, David, is in our detailing, we have the contractors lay down a 2x where the doors are going to be. That way the door sill can get installed lower. Sometimes you see all these beautiful designs and they've got that kind of outdoor and indoor at the same level, but they haven't thought through the fact that the door has a threshold on it at the bottom that's got a real thickness. And so that can wind up being a pretty big trip hazard. Obviously, we got to have some threshold and variation for water infiltration, but if you just have a contractor put a 2x6 usually down in the space where the door is going to go when you pour the foundation, then you just pop that out and then you can recess your door sill right down in there.
Wow. Okay. Again, that's number 2. Great suggestion.
Good. And the same thing holds true of the shower pan. We really love having curbless showers. One, they make the space feel bigger, but it's the same idea when you approach that. You really want to recess the area where your curbless shower is going to go. And that sheet is usually you get some rigid insulation, like some 2-inch thick rigid insulation, not super expensive. Cut that the size of your shower pan and put that in place before you pour your slab. That way, The tile guys can come back in later and build up the waterproofing and the slope. So everything can be nice and seamless.
We did go curbless or damless for our shower.
Great.
And it was a little bit of work when they were our project manager was like, okay, we want to do that. But it was interesting. They didn't have that hack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You really just, the hard part is if you have to have a certain dimension and you've got to get these different layers of drainage and waterproofing. And what can happen if you don't plan for that, then you have to build up the whole floor of the bathroom.
Right.
So you have a curbless shower, but then you have a 2-inch step into your bathroom. So kind of defeats the purpose to some degree. Yeah. So just thinking about, the other option is to jackhammer it out later. But to me, that's just a real inefficient way to, that just, you're not planning. This saves time. It's not expensive to do, it's like maybe a couple hours to put those few pieces at the doors and in the shower, and then you're good to go.
And then having the conversation that you want to have that, because I think, again, another reason to really bring some attention to aging in place is that these are the things to talk to the GC or to the designer, the draftsman, whoever somebody's hiring to put those there. And you can really, it's really done the easiest if you're doing, stick built brand new construction. A little bit harder, I would imagine, if you're converting a garage or trying to do with a manufactured home.
Yeah, I think, we have a line of modulars, and we've made it a mission that all the different, as many age in place features as we can put in our modular unit are in there. And that's, that's by choice, because we think the housing becomes more inclusive. It works more for more people, whether you happen to need a curbless shower because you went mountain biking and overdid it or gardened too much, or whether you actually have a physical ailment that is keeping you from, your daily life needs. So it's really about making that choice and commitment, right? And that's where, it's challenging for us because, as the cost of ADUs are really expensive. And so clients can sometimes get easily talked out of doing some of these things, like setting the foundation lower. And it's not something you can go back and do later, right? You could maybe add a ramp into the cottage later, but like if you were in this cottage, then this whole, outdoor patio would no longer be accessible. So it's really something we advocate strongly for. And, it'd be interesting. I should get an estimate of, maybe I'll see if I can try to follow up with you get an estimate of that curb detail that we like for the foundation versus just a regular slab. And we can see what kind of a financial difference it is. That would be interesting to look at.
That would be great. And would really appreciate that.
Sure. So other elements that we incorporated into our design are trying to really keep the floor plan more open, because you want to think about access and movement and how people navigate these spaces. You'll often see in our designs, we usually do a built-in bench on one side. This has storage down below, and that storage can, it's not stuff you're going to want to get to every day. But it's added extra storage space for seasonal things. And then what this gives you is you have fixed seating on one side, which just is a more efficient model of design. Whereas when you have a table with chairs, you typically, from a design planning perspective, want 3 feet around all the sides so that you can back up the chair, people can still get around. So by using the built-in bench, that gives us storage, saves floor space, and then you have flexibility on the other side of the table. So if you could have 4, wheelchair spots. Actually, this table design looks like it might keep you from rolling in under here, but you've got this whole side that could be changed out to be, wheelchair access, and it doesn't, change the design. You haven't lost any of the integrity, and so just an interesting little space saving cheat that we like.
Well, it's good because you're pointing out the fact that the piece of furniture, the table, I mean, because I can see it right there where you have those chairs that are tucked in under there, that a wheelchair could very easily fit. And I think that's something that, again, most people don't think about it unless they have a family member or they themselves have, had to rely on it before.
Yeah. And, I'm sure some people that may know me have heard this story too many times, but, I started getting really passionate about this because in my 20s, I had all these back problems and I would literally just like fall, not be able to get up for weeks. And I couldn't navigate. I'm something of a strong-willed, stubborn person. And so I found myself just fighting my environment constantly, and I couldn't get off the toilet by myself. I couldn't get up from a table by myself. And so, this is what motivated me to try to figure out, because I thought, well, I'm an architect. If I can't solve these problems, and if I can, why wouldn't we put that into everything we design so that people can, not, it's really hard to not be independent. And it distracts you from healing typically, and puts all this, negative energy into kind of what your environment's doing. So, just that's kind of my reason for why with all of this and why we got into it so much.
Well, I think it's very valuable information. And so I'm happy that we're able to kind of share it and create this content, because I think more attention needs to be paid to it, because it does really greatly improve the person's quality of life.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, keeping the floor space open, in this cottage, we kept all the built-ins. So that built-in bench is just to the left of this picture, and then it transitions into the kitchen. But we've kept all the built-in cabinetry to the perimeter. So the floor space in the center is more open. It makes the space feel bigger, but it also, when you think about access, if you needed to roll up to a counter, if you needed to approach something from a side, you've got that floor area in front of all the cabinets. And that just helps a ton. Drawers are awesome because you can open them and look down and see what you're looking for instead of like physically getting all the way down and hunting for things. So we really do advocate for drawers. And then this is that same cottage. You can just see the built-ins keep going and just go from kind of kitchen to entertainment system. But looking at just, again, the open floor space. So you've got a lot of different access points, wide doors to get from room to room. Now this is slightly distorted. It's not quite that wide, but you need a 32-inch clear opening to get a typical wheelchair through a space. And we just finished, I'm really excited because she just moved in. We just finished a version of this cottage for a young woman who is used as a power chair the majority of the time, and is moved into her parents' backyard so that they can help with healthcare and pool resources. But I'm really excited to be able to share the pictures of that, because we actually did a lot more aggressive aging in place designs, like lowering the sink. And
Right.
It was an interesting conversation, because do you lower the cooking and sink so that she can cook, or do you keep it higher for the caregiver, because caregivers are coming in and then they are hunched over, working at this lower level. And that's, it's a complicated equation on what the right solution is. So I think one of the other fun things about aging in place is that there are some basic concepts, but the other, because it's not governed by something like the American Disabilities Act, there's leniency on how you do it. And you can really start to talk about the proper ergonomics and people's health issues and design specifically, for them. And you can really start to customize things a lot more. So another thing I love about the aging in place ideas. I think one thing this picture shows too is the natural light. We always try to do skylights that are going to bring in a nice, beautiful quality of light, windows at work surfaces like at the sink. As our body ages, our eyes have a really difficult time adjusting with artificial light. So natural light is the best source. It's what works best for everybody's eyes as they age. Like my husband insists he doesn't need reading glasses if it's bright out, but if he's in our house, he does. So getting a lot of natural light in there, trying to avoid glare, because that can create kind of blind spots for walking and can create a trip hazard. And then another really fun design sheet, and it's hard to see at this angle, but when, like, this is a white countertop, when your floor and your countertop contrast, that also helps your eye focus better. So it's a really simple design decision just to do, different color counters from your flooring. And that can help a lot with depth perception. Sometimes you'll go visit a senior and you'll like look at their counter and it's like, gosh, this is actually super dirty. But if it's not well lit and it's a similar color to the floor, then everything begins to collapse. Then they can't pick up on the minutia of the details of the counter. So then you wind up, having more issues.
Well, I thought that was good because it's also featured in the AARP home guide. They also mentioned having the different kind of contrasting colors. And here you've been able to eliminate like a center island, but we did put in a center island, and it is, kind of, it looks like a similar kind of design texture as your countertops that you have. And also our wood floors, our luxury vinyl plank that looks like wood is also a very similar color too. So we do have that contrast because, it is something you really don't think about. It's like walking around the center island. If it was a matching color, someone's going to run into it. And next thing you know, they got a nice big, bruise on themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not fun.
No fun at all. I think the last thing with this little spruce cottage is just thinking about, a couple things you can, again, wide openings so that you can think about simple ease of getting to different places. When designing for aging, it's also, you're usually designing for an older generation. And so being mindful of how they want to live is maybe different than how we thought we were open to living. They don't typically want a studio design. They want more privacy, more separation. So this cottage has a door here to the living room, but then it has a door that can be shut out here so that they can go directly to the bathroom and have privacy, because that is really important typically to an older generation. And then a couple of just fun, like you can just stop with your, universal design and aging in place at the building level, but you can get down into the furniture too. Like this is a great bed. And I'm not sponsored by Design Within Reach, but I love this design where the bedside tables float. So like if you are trying to navigate a chair and you need to swing around and have foot space and all of that, you have room to do that. And then this bed actually for small living has storage drawers underneath it. But also because of the storage drawers and the mattress, it gets the bed up to a nice high level. So it's much easier to get in and out, and you're not like, sleeping on the floor on a platform. You're really getting the bed up to a height that works well for seniors.
And it is very important to kind of keep that in mind too, getting in and out. It's just so much easier if they can just kind of, move their legs over and then they're not having to kind of hoist themselves up from like you said, something low, like a platform bed. And you said that the Design Within Reach is the company that has those fixtures. Yeah,
this bed and the bedside tables are both from Design Within Reach. It's a really elegant design solution. I just love it because it's got that height, it's got the storage, and it's just a nice, smart way to save floor space if you're really thinking about getting someone in and out of a wheelchair and backing them up and navigating and all of that.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and it does look really, really good. And so this, going back to your doorways, there's actually 3 of them. You can see 2, but on the other slide, you could actually see looking into where the washer and dryer are. So you have the one there, then to the right of it, you have where the opening goes into the bedroom, and then you have from the bedroom into that area.
And, I found this is like a very personal point of view. Like we've done a very similar plan to this where we shut the door from the living room to the bedroom, and you have to go into this little interstitial space to get into the bedroom. I find people are very specific about this. There's not really a right or wrong answer to it. And people have a very, very strong opinion. So of whether they, how they want to flow in and out of these spaces, or if they want to get to the bathroom directly without having to go through any kind of common space. So I think it's really about engaging your clients' wishes too,
Sure.
and helping, champion them and
And did you
their
use pocket
design.
doors?
I love pocket doors. So a lot of what happens is when you're in a swing door, if you're having any sort of stability issues, a lot of people kind of hold onto the door for support, but the whole door is going to pivot and open and move. And so if you're leaning on the door and all of a sudden it starts to swing, that's an opportunity for a fall. And so the nice thing with pocket doors is, one, if you're living in the cottage by yourself or there's only a couple people there, you can keep them open most of the time, and then the space feels bigger and you're borrowing light and volume from other rooms. But the other really nice thing is that it's not the risk of falling. So
Right.
you're steady and you're just moving the door in a plane instead of like swinging your center of gravity out from under you with a swinging door. So again, contractors will, it is a bit more framing. Sometimes the doors are a little more expensive. But I think there's a lot of value to pocket doors. And again, if you plan ahead, it's not a huge deal. And also, some people still have residual fear of pocket doors from, cheap 80s and 90s pocket doors. But there's a really nice, Johnson Hardware makes a really great soft close pocket door track.
Really?
So yeah, it's really fun. So that way, it's like a soft close, like kitchen cabinets where you push it in and then it just kind of sucks it and slowly backs it up. The only funny comment I heard, and I'm not sure who to credit this, I don't remember, is that if you're trying to have a dramatic exit with your partner, you can't slam the door. So but it's a great product. So you can do a nice, heavier, solid door so that you don't have that sound transmission and it's not going to get wobbly and get off the track. And then the soft close just really it's very nice and elegant. And that's our favorite go-to.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm
Yeah,
continuing to take notes because I love all of this. This is fantastic.
Well, I think talking about these things is like, it's like when Mercedes designed like the crumple zone front of the car, and they just shared it with every car maker because it's just like, these are not, these are things we choose as a company to believe in and incorporate in as many of our ADUs as possible. But it's not proprietary information. And I think the more of these new ADUs that we make accessible, the better, it just is adding more and more housing.
I think it's fantastic. You actually are putting together or have a newsletter about aging in place. Is that correct?
Yeah, not everybody's open to talking about it. As I mentioned earlier, some people really shut down. Other people are they're planners, they're proactive, and they really want to take control of their, future. And so we have one that's specifically just focused on aging in place, and we don't send it out, like every 3 days, but we share tips. We share, recently completed projects, products that we like, just like the ergonomics of interacting with various products. So we'll kind of feature different products that we think are great for just physical, how you engage. Like I have this one drawer handle that I just love because it's soft and sculpted on the inside, but nice and clean and modern looking on the outside. And so it's just really nice to interact with, right? Sometimes they are too rigid or hard lines. And so, we'll feature different products like that. And then any other, tips or design hacks or features we can share with people so that they can, make their aging in place successful.
I think that's fantastic. If you can share that into the chat, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
I just resized my window so I could grab it myself, and I can't get back to.
Okay, I'll try to put it in the chat at the end because I'm afraid I'll have a similar problem
Share
if
so I
I
can get here. That's what I wanted to find. That's what I wanted. There we go. Perfect. Let's see. I have it. Let's see right here. Paste. Perfect. So now that is for the, and again, I think the newsletter, something like that, and you being able to share that with everybody is fantastic. I thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, we're happy to share what, anything we can do to, champion aging in place.
Yeah, it's perfect. So one of the other things that I know that we did not do nearly all of the things that we could have done, and it would have been nice to have knowing a little bit more about what some of the options are, like that curb around the foundation, so we can have a nice easy transition, talking about thresholds and where the doors are going to be, and making some sort of accommodation again for that, I think is fantastic. What we did, and if you can see this is just out of the AARP, their home guide, I think it's page 25, is where the grab bars are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I always said, well, you got to have a towel bar, should be the grab bar. And you can make that can be an option too.
Right.
But having these, and so you may not, again, some people don't, like you mentioned, may not want to talk about it in the beginning. It's like my father-in-law is 87. He did not want to have grab bars in the shower now.
Right.
He's like, I don't need to have those. I'm fine. I'm like, well, so what we did, and what's called blocking, for those of you who may not know, is so when they're doing the framing of the ADU of the building, they're going to be putting in, solid pieces of lumber behind, as an example, where this grab bar is going to be, or if it's going to be a towel bar that can act like a grab bar. Again, it's not just going to be plain old sheetrock, because that's not going to hold somebody that may really need it and they're about to fall or trip. A very interesting kind of thing that I realized when I was over at my father-in-law's house in Indio, because that's where he's going to be moving from Indio, California, over to Burbank, is that the guest bathroom is one of those one-piece fiberglass shroud. It was built in like the 80s or something. It's a new development. And it has that glass panels, the two panels that slide. And so stepping into that shower, I was amazed, because it's a tub. So first of all, it's, I don't know, 20 inches tall or whatever. But since it's a tub, the back of it is kind of, it's not straight, it's kind of sloped. So you put your foot in, and again, because it's all the same color, when I first put my foot in there, I was like, this would be dangerous to somebody that didn't have a lot of stability.
Yeah. Right.
And there's no grab bars anywhere around it. And so I'm like, holy cow, this is really kind of crazy to think that and this is an over 55 community.
Yeah.
And that when they built these thousands of homes in this great, beautifully manicured, fantastic place, it was not done with aging in place. It seems like a fairly new concept. And again, and also the towel bars there's no grab bars anywhere. And so I'm like, what the heck is going on with this? I mean, and when I saw when they did the blocking in our ADU, they took just a spare piece of lumber and just, nailed it in.
Yeah.
And
super easy to do.
It's real easy to do. The other, so that was something that I kind of noticed. I'm starting to keep these things in my mind, but there are so many that you need to be aware of and should be aware of. And again, this is where I try to do the commercial for architects, is that you are going to, like you mentioned with the unit that's similar to your mother's, with the other person who is in a powered wheelchair, you're having a conversation with that individual. You're talking to them. Who's doing your food preparation? Are you doing it? Is a caregiver doing it? What does that individual's limitations require as far as the height of whatever it is? And you can't just get that in a manufactured home or something that's going to be built in a factory very easily, because I know, because I'm a manufactured home dealer, they are basically going, here's what you get. We're not going to change anything.
Right. Yeah. And even with modular, you can't change anything either. So you have to really find a company, if you want to go that route, try to incorporate as many, age in place features as possible, like keeping the kitchen on the perimeter, putting a curbless shower in. And a lot of times those things, go against the cost value of manufactured or modular. So they don't always get in there.
Yeah. And that's the part where I think that the more often that we can have these kinds of conversations, is to say, as people try to decide what they're going to be doing. I mean, recently I watched an update on the Cal HFA's $40,000 grant.
Yeah.
And that they've basically allocated the majority of the $100 million. And of the 2,400 grant recipients, they're really just beginning their process. they, even though you're supposed to be able to provide a scope of work, a lot of them have just gotten guesstimates
Right. Right.
and submitted it so that they can kind of go forward. And so I think that having these conversations now, when there's thousands of people that are going to have this $40,000 grant from the state of California, they're going to need to know, okay, and this is what I talk to a lot of people about, is like, pick the direction you want to go. You may want to say, oh, I have $150,000 budget. It's like, oh, well, you can do something, but you're going to be a little bit more limited. Our ADU that we're doing is, it's above 250,000. I'll say that, because we did a lot of changes for my father-in-law, and we really wanted to make it as nice and as beautiful as possible. And ours was a pre-designed panel kit that we used. But even when you're using that, all we really had were the walls and the roof. We were able to do so many things and make a lot of changes. So we had a lot of flexibility.
Right.
So that was good. So talking about the direction, talking about this is such a very critical and important thing. You mentioned it earlier that you can't really go back with a lot of these things. You might be able to use the jackhammer, or you might be able to float something up, but it's not as easy. And there are easy things you can do. This is my transition to my story about my mother, who passed. She had Alzheimer's, and she had it for years. And so my stepfather, he grew up in the South, and so he's a very proud, independent thinking person, and wanted to take care of my mother. And unfortunately for him, I think it pushed him into depression because of the difficulties, that he was resistant about caregivers. He did not want to do that, somebody into the home, to the point that he started to get a little bit resentful of the disease that my mother had. And he would kind of sometimes lash out. And my sister would be there kind of going, Mom doesn't know that she's not doing the right thing. And having any sort of dementia, Alzheimer's, having to suffer from that is a horrible, horrible disease. And it's very debilitating. I can't say the word.
Debilitating.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of the things that as I was talking to my sister, who was there with her a lot, about aging in place and those kind of considerations, things to kind of keep in mind. And what my sister shared was my mother's fear or aversion to sitting on the toilet, because she would need to be taken. Okay, Mom, you have to go to the bathroom. Well, she lived in Oregon, and it would get cold there. It's not like Southern California where, it can be hot all the time. So the toilet seat was bracing. So when she would sit on it, it would shock her system, because she was thinking she's just sitting. She didn't know that she was ready to go relieve herself. And so that skin on very cold surface was very bracing to her. So she became fearful and very resistant to sitting down. And this is a very easy fix. You have the washlets.
Yeah.
You have these wonderfully complex, they're a few $100. You do need to plan ahead, because you want to have an electrical outlet.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Like, you don't have to commit to the washlet at this point in time, but you need to put an outlet down by the base of the toilet, so that if you want to add one later, you can.
So the washlet that we have, not only is the seat heated, the water is heated, which is, I think most of them are, but it also has warm air.
Right.
So I'm just like, what the heck? I'm going to have to use this thing before he does. So it sounds really neat. And I feel, and so the reason I like sharing that particular story is because she always had a cold toilet seat to sit on. It was never changed, because it wasn't one of those things until after the fact, you kind of like, oh, you kind of put, one and one together and go, that's probably why. Right. Every person is different. I think that the situations that people kind of encounter, again, whether it's they're in a wheelchair or they are suffering some sort of mental cognitive decline, it's important to kind of look at that individual situation. The other thing that I think that is important. And again, that are easy to take care of are just the fact that, if you can use your hands and you have your strength, using a doorknob is easy. And that's why I think it's one of the most fundamentally basic things that we try to do now is just have a lever handle, because it's much easier to manipulate for somebody who may have arthritis, who may have lost the strength. And just as you were mentioning too about vision and glare, I have a client who we did a project for, and she was very particular on the light because her eyesight was diminished, and the glare made it very hard for her to focus on a lot of things.
Yeah. And again, just thinking about orientation, where your windows are, what, how you, northern light is the most steady, beautiful light. Like that's, if you're designing an art gallery, you want the northern light because it's soft, it's constant. So putting your skylights and things on the northern side of the roof is a great way to just get a nice, steady, constant light. It's not going to, move around the room with a big giant, glare spot. So little ideas like that. Again, you can't always, especially with ADUs or garage conversions, you can't always choose the orientation of your building. But you can think about doing things like that, like the skylights, or, thinking about, windows up high so that you're getting that natural light, but you're not feeling like your privacy. I see all these beautiful designs that have these like floor to ceiling windows and doors everywhere. And, they're beautiful. I think they look great in the magazines, but I don't think they're very livable. Like they're not thinking through people's privacy. I mean, you are putting someone in the backyard that needs some independence and privacy from the main house, right? Like we're taking advantage, pooling resources and developing the multifamily kind of living situation, but you still want to give both parties their own privacy and be really mindful of, how you orient and site the ADU. And so I think kind of getting into how you make it a very initial decision about where to put your ADU, what it's looking at. Sometimes we don't have a lot of choices on that with what the yard might offer you, like a big, a heritage oak tree or something else that we have to work around. But it's worth asking the questions about, I ask my clients to say, okay, where am I going to go when I want to wake up in the morning, go outside, but I don't want to engage with the people in the big house? Like where's my private space? And it's the same thing for the people in the big house. Like you're already losing a big chunk of your yard. And you want to still feel like you have a yard, but you also don't want to feel like you're like staring into a fishbowl and looking like, and then maybe you don't want to engage, right? Like sometimes you just want to be outside, but not talk to your, aging parent. And so thinking about how you can orient things and how you can really like be very mindful of where the windows and doors are, and just think through the privacy, because when everybody wants to get together, it always works, right? The space will find a way, it'll all work out, but it's when you want to be private that you need to design for. I think that's a mantra we live by with ADUs.
Is that one of the first questions you ask people after they're sitting down and engaging with you? Or what are kind of, I know we're shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
But when is it who is going to live there and what is the purpose, or do you already know that?
I usually know that when people are deciding whether they want to work with us, that's usually like our first conversation on an initial phone call before they've decided to work with us, because we've got to figure out like what the design intentions are. And then the other interesting layer with ADUs is that, they're going to evolve, right? They're going to be for an aging parent today. Like at our house, I'm imagining, like, I'm hoping to outlive my husband. And so when our kids want to move back home and they want the big house, I don't want to maintain our bigger house. So I thought about me living in that ADU I just designed for my mom. And then helping out with the grandkids and, being here, but being separate. So I think there's a neat opportunity to think through the life cycle and evolution of the ADU. So you want to make, if you're going custom, you can be as specific as possible, right. But also when you're choosing your method of building, like I'm so excited to see how your panel project works. We have some fun, exciting panel news that'll come out before too long. I'll give you a little teaser on that. But when you're choosing your modular company, or you're choosing whether to do a pre-designed plan, you can still think about how you're going to use it, go through the scenarios. I like clients to talk about, okay, you're here in the cottage and you want to have the family over for dinner. Like one of our first ones we did in Berkeley, the 83-year-old mom wanted to be able to have her daughter and son-in-law and her granddaughter over to the cottage every Sunday. She had always made dinner on Sundays and she wanted to keep up that tradition.
Wonderful.
So we thought about, do we have enough space if her 2 kids and their spouses and their kids all come over? Can we fit everybody? So that was like a design requirement that she had. And she wanted a kitchen she could cook in. So not an efficiency. She wanted a more robust kitchen. Coming up with what the priorities are for you. And then, thinking through what you're nervous about, or, a lot of people are afraid there won't be any storage, or where will I put everything?
Right.
And we have so many clients that have moved in and honestly, we'll still have an empty drawer here and there. And you're just like, all right, see, if you really think about it, in designing for how people live instead of how they would like to live, I think is also a really important conversation. We're not going to change our ways. Even in our 40s, we're not going to change our ways, much less when you're in your 70s or 80s. So just actually designing for how people live. So it's helpful too, to sometimes see people's existing space, because then you can see a lot more about how they live in a space versus how they think they might live, or how they, they're going to become a minimalist and get rid of all their things. And, it just, change is good. I'm sure a lot of people can do it, but with our habits, with how we live in our environments, I think those are hard to shift. So better to just talk about them, think about them, design for them. And when you're picking who you want to work with, understand the flexibilities of the different options, right? Like you were saying with the panel, and one thing I love about it, modular is awesome. We have a line of modulars. I'm excited about it, but it only works in a third of people's yards because there's power lines, crane issues. You just can't always get them back there. So the panelized is really fun because you can get it in every yard, sometimes even tighter, more complicated yards. And then the other thing that you were mentioning is you can adapt it, right? You can add blocking, you can change something on site if you really get the walls up and something's not quite right, or there's an alignment issue, you have the option to, it's still just a 2x6 wall or 2x4 wall. So you can still,
we did make changes.
Yeah. And so, hopefully with the design process, a good architect or designer, you'll know what you're getting ahead of time. But, a lot of people have a hard time visualizing, and they can't see 3 dimensions. They have a hard time reading drawings. And, we have tons of videos of our ADUs, but people still want to come walk through one. They can't get a sense of the space until they're in it. And so a lot of times clients will have that where the walls get framed up and they think, oh, that's not exactly what I expected, or what about this? And so considering what your building technique is, will let you know whether you have the opportunity to make changes or not. Like you were saying with manufactured or modular, there are no changes. So
it's very, very limited. I mean, it's one of the things that you touched on a moment ago is that, talking to somebody and seeing their space. And we've been doing that with because we were in India with my father-in-law, and we were it was interesting watching him, how he did move around.
Mm-hmm.
And he's because he's been in this particular house for about, I think 12 or 13 years, and he's kind of used to it.
Yeah.
So one of the things my wife wanted to make sure is he needs to have a place for his desk.
Right.
He likes to open up his computer, look at the stocks, see what how his portfolio is doing, and just kind of check out the news. So he has a little bit of a routine. And then he has a little counter area separating, it's not really a true traditional bar between the living room and the kitchen and the dining room area. And again, his house now has a lot of unused space.
Sure.
It's just a tremendous amount of unused space. So I think we're going to be able to get him he'll get used to it, but it is going to be a change, and it's going to be tough.
Right. Well, and that's another good point to talk about is just, my vision for how these all ADUs and multifamily would work is it's much better to start it when the senior, and I'm always searching for a better name than senior, but when the senior is younger, because they're more adaptable. It is hard to learn all the new technology and how to use a new stove and a new thermostat and a new, toilet washlet. I mean, it's all the newness is challenging. And so it's like the more we can talk about this and to get the message out that you could have like an amazing, beautiful ADU that's totally age and place friendly, and be proactive and plan it. Because once you're in a crisis, you don't want the transition. You don't want a construction project. It's like, it's really great to really start having these conversations in a multi-generational, and I say multi-generational a lot. We have a lot of clients who really want to stay in their neighborhood, want to be near their friends, their routines, their doctors, their stores they're used to, but they don't want the big house anymore. And so they're building the cottage for themselves and then renting out the big house as an income stream. So
I've heard
that's
people wanting to do
another,
that. I thought
yeah,
that was a really brilliant idea, where it's not just, it's like my situation or your situation where
yeah,
we have the house and we built it for our parent.
mhm,
It's just like, could be people that are very independent, but are still thinking, let's do this now or start the
yeah,
process, as opposed to when you're in crisis. One of our people that we know and we respect a lot, Steve Vallejos with Prefab ADU, um, kept using the pain point. What is a person's
right,
pain point? So it's a very commonly used phrase. And typically you see, not typically, but the Turner Center out of Berkeley, their study says that the majority of ADUs are being built for an older parent.
yeah,
Because the pain point is they need some level of care, whether it's just a little bit of, let's just make sure we can check on you, to we need to be able to go and help you with your meal prep and with your hygiene.
right,
I mean, that's another elevated level. Or do I need to have a caregiver with you, on a really regular basis, which you're talking about now, an ADU that has 2 bedrooms.
yeah,
And that's something that people are having to really, kind of wrestle with. And when you come to that pain point, it's like, I really want it. It's like these designs take a period of time,
mhm,
have the conversation, to look at the renderings, to start building it out, talking about it just before you finalize, then going to permits, getting bids, going to get permits, then the build. It can be a year or two. And
right.
that if somebody's going to need assisted living is just so absolutely expensive.
It's nuts.
And so
It's
even in
nuts.
today's high interest rates, it's still by far, I believe, the best option for anybody that has a family member in that situation, is to start it now.
Yeah. And the cool thing is like, if you do have grandparents in the backyard when they're younger and able, then often they're helping with childcare, so they're helping with, other things while they're, able. And so there's a good reason to jumpstart it. And then, the other thing I was just thinking about, I just lost my train of thought, but I got fired up on all this stuff. But yeah, I lost it. Maybe it'll come back.
No.
You got to start planning before you forget things all the time. So you got to.
No, and I think that's it,
it.
because I think a lot of people, and again, I mentioned the ADU grants from Cal HFA. There's thousands of people that are doing that. I think this will become a national trend.
Yeah.
And I think that these kinds of conversations, I think, we in California, we're now diving into the minutia because we've done enough of these. We've had hundreds of conversations, and the majority of people are for family members. And now we're really trying to get our hands wrapped around the really great benefits of having an ADU. And like you said, and I agree, do it sooner than later.
Yeah. Okay. I remember what I was going to say. So this is a fun story. There's 2 points. One of the other pain points is like, the adult child worried about the parent, like I can't see mom, they're across town, they're in another state, they're across the country. And so there's that peace of mind question of having them in the yard. And I'm not going to completely sugarcoat. There are some, it does change your life to put your parent in your backyard, and you are becoming more of a caregiver role. But the truth is you were going to become that anyways. And so the proximity of checking on someone in 2 minutes versus driving across town. And a neat story from one of our really early clients, their parents were in Virginia, outside of DC, and they were here in Mountain View. And so they only saw their parents for, like 2 weeks at a time here and there. And so the dad was a professor, and he was an avid reader. And nobody noticed he wasn't reading anymore, because when you only see someone for a 2-week vacation, you don't pick up on their daily life habits, right? Because everybody's life is not the normal. So once he moved into the cottage, she noticed he didn't read. Well, it turns out he had really bad cataracts, but didn't want to bother any of his kids. So he didn't bring it up to anybody. So by living closely and being able to be more in touch and seeing how people are actually living instead of having these like visits with people where everybody's on their best behavior, you're not necessarily seeing all the issues that might be coming up. She really got to see firsthand, like, oh, dad has, and it was a simple fix and it was easy. And then he could read again, and it's like, but you're not picking up on that if you're not around someone all the time.
And I think that's a fantastic story, because that generation of our parents does get a little bit, stubborn and strong-willed, and I don't want to bother anybody. And that's a little bit that's too bad. And it is. And again, this is a very exciting topic in this development of ADUs throughout the state. And as we're talking about design, I think I really do applaud what you're doing and what like big groups like AARP are doing. They've been huge advocates for ADUs for years and years. And I think this is the reason why we're seeing it. 87-year-old father-in-law and your mother.
80-year-old mother, yeah.
So when my wife was saying we were out eating, and she goes, you know what, I really hope that when we do have, dad in the back, that I have him for a long time. And I don't want anything to happen where we've gone through this effort she really has been so motivated by being able to enjoy much more time with her father.
Right.
And to her, that is just, it's everything.
Right.
So it is really, and so we look at that as a blessing and of an opportunity, and we are very hopeful that we're going to be enjoying his company for many, many years.
Right.
And when he does transition, we'll have this fabulous place that we can either rent out or live in ourselves and tear down, because we're in Burbank, and so we have this very, very small primary.
Yeah.
You want to hopefully remodel it or get something a little bit bigger, because if you own property in Burbank, you never want to sell.
Yeah.
Because the prices are through the roof, and it is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Where are you going to go?
Yeah. And exactly. We're in Southern California, you're in Northern California. The weather. So I'm looking at my notes. One of the things I wrote down before we wrap up is get the link to the AARP. It's a free download. Get those things. Sign up for Inspired ADUs newsletter, Carrie's newsletter on aging in place, because we can't cover everything in an hour.
Right.
One of the things to think about is the height of the toilet seat. Again, I keep going to the toilet seat. I don't know. So no, 15 inches.
You're in a phase.
We are. I'm a guy. So we have 15 inches, which I think is the height of ours, because it's an older toilet. But then looking at all the new ones, they are a lot higher. So 17 to 19 inches. I think that's a great thing. So just take the time to Google it, look at it as you're talking to your family about building the ADU. There are simple things to keep in mind that if it is for a family member, they may be very, mobile, and their eyesight might be fantastic, and they might have lots of, strength and dexterity, but that will change. And it may change.
The other great thing, is that a lot of these things that are just better designed, like the taller toilets, those have just kind of become now industry standard. So whether you're aging in place design or not, because when you sit on one of those 15 inches, it's shocking. It's like, oh, you almost fell on the floor. It's like they're so far down, So I think one of the really good things is they are making attractive grab bars now, that actually match everything in your bathroom. And they're, there's just good design that's becoming more standard. So that hopefully a lot of this stuff will be more incorporated in the future. But you do want to ask the questions when you start, with whoever you're going to work with on what you can do to stay as independent as possible.
And I think that's fantastic. On that note, which is a great place to end, Carrie, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I think your insight is very valuable. So if folks are looking as Inspired ADU, they have a great website, easy to find. And again, we will be able to post some links and references when we do get this content on our socials. So